Ever wonder how a flat map can tell you how steep a trail is? ACMG guide Alex Mack is here to fill in the contours of our mapping knowledge. Take a moment now to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so our message gets out to more viewers. Let's get cracking.
So, why does this matter? Statistics. With the background in academia, I like numbers. Sandra loves numbers. SAR has amazing statistics and data that they share both on their website and in the resources that we see online across their social media and other SAR teams. So already Sandra mentioned that BC Search and Rescue respond to, in the last year, over 1,900 calls. And on average, that's generally the range that we're seeing, especially more recently. And the top three reasons that people are calling are injury, being lost or disoriented, which is very specific, obviously, to what we're looking at tonight, and exceeding abilities. And exceeding abilities can also kind of come back to navigation of, if we're able to navigate, we may have the ability to get ourselves to avoid being in risky situations or get ourselves out of situations where otherwise there would be higher risk. So I think that's really important to remember that these skills can apply to different areas where we see these calls. And mind you, injury as well. If we are able to avoid risky terrain and learn that from our maps, we could possibly avoid that injury as well. So another thing to reiterate here is that while there is no charge for search and rescue, it doesn't mean it's free of risk. There's risk if you've called because you're in a situation where you need to be helped. But also there's risk to the volunteers and those teams that are going out to respond to the call. They're putting themselves in that terrain. They're highly trained, but still they're having to respond to something that theoretically we could avoid. Not always, but in these cases. So the goal of today and why this all matters is that not only are we helping ourselves and the people that we adventure with, avoid situations that are more risky or be able to, address them, but also we're helping the teams that do all the work and letting them divert, their resources to potentially other situations that might need them. So it's great to contribute in that way. All right, so foundations. We're going straight back to the 101s. So topography. Topography, when we see the term topography or topographic maps, topography talks about the 3D shape of the land. It's everything above sea level. So ridges, valleys, steepness, elevation, anything that we see above the ocean that has an elevation above sea level. So a topographic map, what that does is it starts to capture that 3D shape for us and then transition it into, in paper maps, we're going to say 2D. There is now 3D more on digital maps, but in the context, we're going to say onto a 2D map so we can read the terrain on something that's two-dimensional with that information overlaid onto it. So in this case, we also Scott introduced the contours in the puns. We're going to see a lot of contour lines. And what the contour lines is, they almost translate, those elevation levels into lines that we can see on the map. So we can then interpret it and make our decisions based on what we see from those lines on the map. It's like a language. It's like a language of being able to read terrain, which is super cool. And we're going to explore that language tonight. And again, we're going to see how this topography and how this language is translated and presented both on paper maps and then on digital interfaces, whether that be actual websites that you can go to on your desktop or on apps that we have access to through our digital devices, mobile devices. All right, so again, introduce these very quickly. I already spoke to it, but tonight we're going to go through compare and contrast paper maps and our digital topographic maps, pros and cons. And I'll give you a sneak preview. The best thing to do is to learn and practice with both. And I'm going to probably hammer that home all night. But these are all tools that we can use and tools we can practice with and that we should continue to practice with, even when one might seem, more beneficial in certain ways than others. The more tools we understand how to learn, the better that we can apply them in the field. That was actually a great note that I learned when I only did my apprentice hiking guide last year, but I loved what one of our instructors told us, which was right tools, right time. You have so many tools at your disposal. learning to move through terrain is understanding when to use those tools at the appropriate time. So that's what we're going to do tonight. So scale, again, a foundation, but we'll go through it because it's really important to all of the interpretation here. So you're seeing these ratios, and if you're not familiar with the ratio, what the ratio shows us is 1 unit on the map is equal to a given number of units on the ground. So in this case, a 1 to 50,000 scale is a pretty common one that we see in Canadian NTS maps. So the larger that second number, that means the less resolution or detail you're going to see on the map. To translate that and give you some real numbers here, what that means in this case is that 1 unit on the map is 50,000 units in the field, meaning that a centimeter here is 500 meters on the ground. So we can see that on the grid square as well, where this grid square is actually 2 centimeters, and that shows us that each grid square is 1 kilometer. So there's different ways that you can interpret it, either by the grid square or by taking the scale here. And we can also use the scale to even measure things ourselves by using things like strings that we have on our compass to actually go out and take that across our map and measure them manually when we're doing that in the field or with a physical map. When we do the measurements, I don't think I actually included the video here, but the key difference between measurements on a digital map versus a physical map is that on a physical map, obviously, we can't just go with a ruler and measure from one end to the next. We actually need to use something like a piece of string and measure segments of our route and then add those up. So it's a little bit more cumbersome, but in a way that allows us to really break down the route that we're taking and consider how long each branch might take, and then what kind of terrain we're moving through on each segment of that route. On digital maps, it can be much more straightforward. A lot of the, and I'll be showing later in the presentation, a lot of the interfaces we have now have tools like Snap to Trail. So you can just click on the map and it'll take you directly to that point based on the trail that it understands and has in that map resource. However, that can also have the issue of snapping to trails that maybe aren't really trails, that it's assuming are there, or routes that might not be open, or the maps can sometimes make assumptions. So again, another reason why it's great to use both resources. So again, on digital maps, coming into scale here, we've talked about scale on our physical map. Digital maps, the scales, what's great about them is, again, we have that ability to zoom in and out. So we don't have a static scale on those. Our scales are usually shown in the bottom corner. This is on a map app. This is on Granite here that I'm showing, where the scale is just shown here. It's showing that each of those bars is 500 meters. And when you zoom in and out, that scale size will actually change based on how much you've zoomed in and out. So it's dynamic. And the same thing here is an example on CalTopo. It gives us actually both imperial and metric units, and it will shift as we move in and out. But also we have different measurement tools too that we can use. And again, as I was talking about resolution basically means how much detail can I pick up in a given amount of space. So moving from a smaller number, so a 1 to 20,000, to a larger number, say a 1 to 150,000, or even 1 to 250,000, which are available out there, we get much finer detail in our routes and in all the different terrain features, and then we move into having much less detail. So these higher scales are something that you would use probably for a larger route, like if you were trying to look at, a through hike from the bottom to the top of Canada, if you're looking at the Great Divide Trail, to get a bigger idea of how far you're actually going. But for each leg of your segment, you'd have a very hard time understanding what the topography looks like for each of those legs. So there's various uses for different scales, which is generally why we tend to see most of the Canadian NTS maps being at 1 to 50,000, because it's a really nice intermediate to give us enough information on trails, but still cover a wide area. Okay, getting into the contours. So I like this. This is my favorite stuff. Contour lines. They are telling us about how we can read, again, the language of the land. So if you're, again, I'm sorry if folks are know all this stuff already, but it's always fun to look at. So a contour line connects points at equal elevation. So if I'm looking at a point over here, you guys can see my mouse, right? Okay, great. I can follow that line all the way across, and this will be the same elevation the entire way. Now, obviously, it's going to be tricky when you get to points where they might merge, and we're going to talk about what those are. But essentially, that's what the contour lines are doing. And to understand if we're increasing or decreasing in elevation, we need to look at different contour lines and identify which, based on their numbering, are higher or lower, so we know which direction. So in this example, we've got one at 1,400 meters and one at 1,600 meters. So as we go in this direction, that means we'd be gaining elevation or altitude, right? And then the other way, obviously, we're coming lower, and that actually, in this case, brings us down to a lake. So the most important, if you could take one thing away from the contour side of things, the most important thing to remember is that when they're really, really closely spaced, it means it's more steep. And when they're more widely spaced, it means, I'm going to say less steep. Some people will say gentler terrain. I think I've put an asterisk on that before, because you can have relatively less steep terrain on challenging terrain types. So I could be on a glacier, and I don't know if I call that gentle terrain. It might be gentle slope, but it might not be the easiest terrain. So
It could
all that
also
to
be
say,
extremely rooty. Like there's a whole bunch of things.
exactly.
I love this map, by the way. This map is a great example of a map that not only has all the contour lines, but also has
Mm-hmm.
really detailed trails. And it's maintained by Parks Canada. And I was up there
Yes.
not that long ago.
Yeah.
The reason why I love this one so much is uh, one of the things that people were talking about in the chat is they don't know what type of map to get. And one thing
Mm,
that I've run into, I went down into the States once in Idaho just a couple of years ago, and I had maps that I thought were the USGS maps, and they were the most up to date. They were from
mm,
1983,
yep.
and the trails were all wrong.
Yep.
The trails weren't there. So
Yeah.
how do we know which of those maps are good maps and which of those maps are lousy maps?
That's a great question. It it obviously really depends on your region, because there's different providers and different institutions that are working with map providers to update those. In this example, these maps are GemTrek maps. So those are based mostly around the Rockies, I believe, and some come more into BC. So this one's actually from the Yoho National Park area. And that's why I picked this one, because that's pretty much as far as into BC as they take them. So to choose your map, obviously you want to choose based on scale, as a primary thing, but then also looking for the most up-to-date information. So looking online at the map providers, obviously you like if you're just traveling and you want to find a physical one right away, you're kind of stuck with what you can find. The retailer would normally hold the most up-to-date edition unless you're using them at a secondhand place. But you would hope that they're the most up to date. I think sometimes they'll be within, 10 years generally. But if you're getting a map from a friend or a family friend who's like, I got that map from the NAD 60 something, and you're like, oh yeah, well, it's the same region, it'll be fine. And then you realize later that it's, 60 years old. It's not going to work so much. So my recommendation would be to look first at the date on the map, and consider how long ago it was updated or the edition was updated. If it's not a good date and it's not a more up-to-date version, you might consider looking up that same map provider and look and see if they've got newer editions available online. Often you can find them. The kind of caveat here is that less and less people are offering paper maps. I'll be honest, like they can be a lot harder to find these days. Even the parks, I went to try to find a Grouse Mountain map for the series that we did because I wanted to use that in the video. And they're like, we don't make them. Cypress makes them, but Grouse Mountain doesn't. And they only have them online, and I still couldn't find them online. So all that to say, it's very region dependent. But if you're looking for the key things to look for to ensure that the map is appropriate for what you want to do, look first at the dates, look at the edition date, and also make sure it's the right scale for you. And if you can, do some research before you buy them. I'm sorry, it's a hard answer.
No, it's still important that people
Yeah,
recognize that just because you can get a map, and even if it's from an official source, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good map.
yeah, yeah. I would if you can, and if you find a map that you're like, ooh, this could be good, before taking it out into the field, look up the publisher and see if they've got newer editions of that. That would be my suggestion. Um, and people are you can ask me all the questions and see if I can answer any better. Um, cool. So going just quickly back into examples here. So for more gentle terrain, obviously we're looking for more widely spaced areas. So here you can see in this map, in this example, and some map providers have slightly different colors, but often you will see that green is forested area. When you move out of that into a different color, that's usually brown or gray, you're going into alpine. And then when you get into a white shade, that's usually glacier. Usually. There are slight variations between map providers sometimes, but you will see those gradations. When you're in the forested areas, you will have obviously variations in slope. Like here, you can see that this is quite steep in this section, but then you've got a flat area here. But generally, once you're moving up into alpine, you again start to see more steep slopes. So we've got tighter and tighter slopes here. But then over on the glacier over here, which is why I was saying this is an easy terrain, but it's gentler slopes. You've got those gentler slopes there. So another really important thing I want to point out here is not just the steep slopes, but also cliffs, because that is something that catches quite a few people each year and garners some search and rescue calls. So cliffs are when you see these lines basically coming together. And we can see a really nice cliff band right here. This is a beautiful cliff band. This is somewhere you don't want to get caught and not know where to turn around. The cliffs that often catch people are the ones that happen to be like little nooks coming off of an area that seems pretty benign. This one obviously is a very obvious cliff on the map, but maybe if you're in forested terrain and you can't see where you're going, and then you come out to a cliff and realize you can't go back, having been able to see this on a map prior to going out would have been very helpful. So the reason I bring this up is again that oh, there's my cliff sign. Every year we have several search and rescue calls for cliffed out hikers. We have quite a bit of this on the coast. We've got Fernie SAR over here, and I think throughout we're seeing that happen. But it's really a great thing to practice looking for on your maps, even if it's an established route, because sometimes if you're on an established route and you take a little side detour, you can end up on a cliffside, even if it was close to a very popular route. So looking at your maps, even if it's established trail before you go out, is really, really helpful. I have definitely taken my version of Alex detours before. I have luckily not been cliffed out, but sometimes my friends and family like to laugh that I go on my tangents. And after being more of an outdoors person, I realized that tangents can take me places like this. So luckily, so far that hasn't happened for me, but it definitely could have happened when I was less experienced. And I've become more and more aware of this as I continue to learn more. So it's kind of funny looking back on those things, but also go like, oh, I really should have learned about this a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago or whatever. But here we are. All right, so we've gone through contour lines. We're going to get into more pictures because I like pictures. We're going to compare contour lines to actual features because we're going to get into resection a little bit later, and being able to do a resection, which means trying to figure out where you are relative to the land around you. You got to kind of be able to pinpoint different pieces of land around you and terrain. So to be able to understand what those terrain features look like is a huge skill set that is really fun to practice. And I thought I'd use this example image that I really like, but I'm biased, that we took at I took at one of the mountaineering camps last year, because it's just a beautiful range and we can really kind of pull out different features in that range. So don't worry about this because I'm going to take you through all of them individually. There are more terrain features than this, but for the sake of today's talk and to introduce these are our fundamental ones, and you are more than welcome to ask and or go and research and nerd out on all the extra ones because there's a bunch. But to start, we are going into the most obvious one. So what I've done is I got the picture here on the left, and I did my little squiggle highlights on the right of the pieces that we're looking for. So summits or peaks, highest points on a mountain, often labeled on this map really beautifully. They give us both, look at that, both metric and imperial, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make fun of the American units, but I prefer the metric, but it's there for everybody. So summits or peaks,
Have it
closed
in
circles.
furlongs. Why don't they have it in furlongs?
I don't know what that means, but it sounds provocative. So we should add that too. Why not? So summits and peaks, you're going to see these as closed circles that are coming up to a point. And again, the closer those circles are together, the steeper that peak is going to be. So here, they're often labeled, as I mentioned, either as the peak and or the number. When you're going on different maps, sometimes there's more specific peaks that are more well known in that area that are highlighted, and other ones are there, but they're just not highlighted specifically as a named peak. Again, depends on your the publisher, but that's what we're looking for. So highest point right there. Then we've got saddles or cols. These are really important because you're often going to see designations of these potentially as passes as well, meaning that it's been used historically for people to move through, especially when we didn't have, highways and planes and all those things. And these were passes that have been used over generations for people to travel from, one large area to a very distant next area through challenging mountain terrain. So often these are going to be called saddles or cols. So it's a saddle between two peaks, and they're called passes because, again, you don't ideally want to go over the point of least resistance. So if you've got to go through these high areas, these are the places you'd like to pass through generally. So on the map, you see these between the peaks here, between peaks here. This, I'm not going to try to say the name because I haven't practiced it, but this pass is between two peaks here. So that's your saddles and your cols. Ridges. I am biased. I love ridges because I like scrambling and I like cool rocks. So I really enjoy ridges. That said, they can be extremely technical. So it depends on where you are, but a ridge is a piece of land that's often steep or exposed, that is connecting high points or going from a high point downwards. So again, I didn't get to do this ridge last year. I really wanted to do this ridge last year, but it's a really nice ridge. But you will see there's different ridges like Tent Ridge. That's a very popular one in Alberta. That is much less technical than this, much more mellow and much easier to travel on. So not all ridges are super technical, but that is how you can identify those features. Like in this example on this map, this ridge is probably pretty doable without needing to be roped up. That said, I haven't done it, so don't take my word on it. But just looking at the terrain here, it looks much more mellow than going on something like this, which is looking a bit more steep and exposed. Then we've got valleys and drainages. Oh, actually, sorry, I should point that these are often V-shaped, and the V is pointing away from the high point, so pointing downhill, if you will. Now, valleys and drainages are kind of the opposite in terms of what we're looking for on the map. So they're V's, often as V's, but they're pointing uphill, and what they do is they often follow creeks. So you've got them pointing kind of between two high points, if you will, but not as a col, kind of leaning into a water source or even a glacier where you'd have that runoff, creating that space between these high points. So we've got those V shapes here. You can see that this is a valley in here between these two high points here. This is a valley here. There is another high point over here. And then we've got the drainage coming down in the image here. So we've got water settling and moving often through these. And then we've got spurs. So these are more of a U shape than a V shape, and they're the higher ground between often two valleys or drainages. And here is another example on that image where we can see the values here and here. And it's, again, coming off of a higher point, but a relatively flatter space or terrain feature than a ridge, if you will. Okay, so we've learned our fundamentals, we've learned our contour language to a certain, or reviewed it. Now we're going into comparing and contrasting different reasons why we might use different tools. So paper maps, even though we talked about they can be a little bit hard to find sometimes, depending on where you are, depending on who's covering that area. But they are still the gold standard as long as they are up to date and of the appropriate scale. The reason being that they don't require batteries and we don't rely on signal for them. We're able to read them, to use them for ourselves rather than follow them, or a blue dot that we see on a screen that is also reliant on external signals or energy. So the great reason, again, to use paper maps is because it allows us to practice and to read. We're not just, being pulled along. We're reading, we're interpreting, and we're practicing and using that brain muscle to really put it to work, if you will. There are often waterproof versions, which would be your best bet, especially out here on the coast. Anywhere you can get rain whenever. Any of us who've been in the field know that you can get rain pretty much whenever. I've even been rained on in the desert where there's not supposed to be any rain and it had rain for days. So I've seen it everywhere. So rain can happen everywhere. Waterproof is best. And again, the downside here, as we mentioned, is that it can be a bit challenging to get current accurate paper maps for some areas. But again, for most areas, especially more, I guess, popular or populated or busy areas, I guess is what I'm trying to say, often we can find a map or equivalent that is a physical piece. So what do we do if we can't find a paper map? There are things that we could do if you have a printer. And that, we were joking earlier, Scott's got a printer. I don't have a printer, but I have ways to get to printers. So there's ways that we can access printers. You can go on to different online resources before your trip, and you can print a physical map and bring it with you. CalTopo is a great resource where you can select the area that you'd like, the layers that you'd like, you can include your markings on it, and you can print that off for the area, and it gives you the scale, and it gives you your declination and everything you need to apply it just like a paper map that you would buy from a provider, which is awesome. It is a little bit, if you haven't played with CalTopo yet, it can be a little bit intimidating at first, but once you get the basics, again, this is practicing with that language muscle of interpreting and navigating through map resources themselves, and getting familiar with that. And either way, the key is if you don't have the official paper map of the area, having some kind of backup that works without relying just on a GPS signal is your ideal situation. Okay, benefits of digital maps. Global access, or you can access pretty much whatever region you want. You're not limited to just that one map's coverage, which is nice. There's multiple options these days. There's so many options for map layers and data, and I love data. So it's really cool to use those and apply those in different ways. And this is example on granite, I've got the slope feature shown. So anything that's like purple is very, very aggressive slope, and green is, moderate 15-degree slope. But again, if you turn that off, you can still figure that out with your contour lines. So again, we don't want to rely on fancy tools instead of the fundamentals, but they are nice tools to have if you're trying to visualize a larger area really quickly. So multiple customization options, tools for trip planning. So Snap2Trail is great. Real-time GPS location in the field, as we said, can be very helpful. Downside, again, batteries. If your screen cracks, you don't have another screen, or somebody else doesn't have a phone that's got the maps on it, no buenos. And then you're never guaranteed a signal. While, cell signal these days is much better than it might have been 10 years ago, It's never guaranteed. Things can go wrong. Uh, you're never guaranteed a perfect GPS signal. And I've had mine creep all the time, which drives me nuts. And luckily, I can work my way around it because I can generally read maps and work with that. But if I couldn't, I would be very frustrated. So I'm going to go through a few resources here, kind of starting from basics to more advanced tools that I would recommend everyone try out in some degree. And they all come with free versions, I'm quite sure. So the first one is kind of the basic where everybody on their hike, if you want to call it hiking journey, I don't use the word journey all the time, but you know, people are moving through those things. AllTrails is a fan favorite of the population because it's very accessible. And I have to say, it does give quite a bit of valuable information. The best thing you can find on AllTrails is recent reports of people going to that area. If you want to see what the conditions are, without looking at the map or seeing satellite itself, you will get feedback from a lot of folks there on the status of that area or of that trail. So I find that very helpful. They do give you pretty good map breakdowns, but people can lean on it a bit as a crutch sometimes. And then the other issue is there is that meme out there of people saying AllTrails said 4 kilometers and 20 kilometers later I came back and I don't know what happened. I think they've gotten better, but sometimes there's been questions about the accuracy of certain routes. So, and the ranking of difficulty. For all this stuff, difficulty is so subjective. Difficulty for people who have grown up in Squamish versus someone like me who maybe just moved from Ontario and had never hiked before in their lives and has terrible lungs ain't the same thing, right? So that's something to kind of point out there. Scott, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say exactly the same thing. When I was in New Zealand, they had a rating system which was for the entire country, which is great. It was class 1, 2, 3, 4, and they had type 1, 2, 3, 4, if I recall. And it was nice because it was standard by the whole country, but it doesn't in any way, shape, or form map to what I would be used to in Ontario or map to what I would be used to here. So you really have to know your local area.
Fully. I think of it also like as the ski hills, you know, a double black in Whistler versus a double black in Ontario. It's a hilarious joke. Anyways, so those are things to pay attention to for AllTrails. I'll try to keep moving a bit faster here because I realize there's still some tools got to go through. Granite is another app, more recent, and they've been an awesome partner for us in some of the Reels series that we've just put out called Maps and Mountains 101. If you've seen them, great. If you haven't seen them yet, check them out, send them to your friends. Hopefully a good resource for folks, especially if they're just getting into it as well. But Granite's been super supportive. I think there's also a potential to win a subscription to them, so stay to the end. But they've got, again, this is an example with multiple layers. Excuse me. They have options for looking at winter terrain too, and different options specific also to things like ski touring. So really, really cool features on Granite. Gaia GPS, so many layers. If you want to go through different options for layers, it's a smorgasbord of layers and different opportunities and different maps. So you could get, you know, USGS maps versus Canadian maps versus all of these different resources that show you slightly different things on the map. Even if it's the same terrain, they've got different indicators or maybe more up-to-date dates on those specific maps that they're offering. So I really enjoy Gaia as well. Great for route tracking as well. CalTopo I mentioned, super powerful for planning. You can print maps. I'm kind of going from least nerdy to most nerdy here. So we're going deeper and deeper into the nerdiness. Highly recommend playing around with CalTopo. And then if this isn't a Maps app, but the thing that drives me most crazy, and it's the reality of it, when you go onto a Maps app, you're not seeing the most recent satellite data. It could be showing you snow, which is kind of seasonal, but it might not be the snow that's there right now. If you go to Copernicus, this is free. You can visualize the land and how much snow is still there based on recent satellite imaging. So the most recent satellite imaging I could find with low cloud was, what day is this? Yesterday. And this is the amount of snow that's on the mountains right now. So if you're like, oh, I wonder if there's still snow in this area that like I want to go and summit or do something, like this is freaking great. So I only learned about this last year. So I've been using it all the time. It's fantastic. So not mapping, but trip planning adjacent. Very, very great. Okay. I realize we're at 38 minutes, so I'm gonna be mentioning these tools and talking about them. But the key point here is for you guys to take home this information and start using it and practicing in different ways. So attention over retention for this, especially the next like 5 minutes. I don't want you to remember all of this right now, but I'm going to tell you there's different types of measurements of coordinates that you're going to see on different apps. So I'm going to show you here what they are, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like on your app and why it's important. So there's UTM, called Universal Transverse Mercator. It shows you on a grid system, and it gives you specific numbers, 6 digits, to line you up on that grid system. Don't worry about how you're going to read it. This is something you're going to have to learn yourself in the field, but it's slightly different from latitude and longitude, which is placing you on the globe, and it's giving you, instead of digits, you're going to see degrees, minutes, and seconds, or decimal degrees. This is generally what's going to be used when you're calling for help or sharing location, usually. Often a latitude and longitude. You can convert between these two, but if you want to go nerd out more, this is a really interesting system to compare and contrast, and I'll show you where this comes into play in your apps. So for example, on Gaia, I have my Gaia because for our hiking guiding, to plan out our routes, we use UTM, not lat long, but we still do coordinates based on lat long to practice. But I wanted to practice my UTM. On Gaia, as an example, I can set my units on Gaia to be UTM or lat long. And those are things that you can practice and play around with in your apps, especially for practicing those skills. On other apps, for example, on many apps, Google Maps, all those things, don't use Google Maps for this, but I'm just saying Google Maps you will often see give you coordinates too. Those coordinates are decimal lat longs that you're going to see. And that's what most people, I think, here are probably more familiar with. But I just wanted to point you out to these two types of coordinate systems that you might come across in the field. And you will see on your maps. On the borders of your maps, you're going to see both of them. And if you're wondering what those are, that's what those are. There's 3 norths. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but they're very important for you to learn for your compasses. The reason being is that there is a north on your map, there is a north that your magnet is pulling to, and there is a true north point on the globe. Magnetic north also drifts. So we're introducing more complexity into the system. What I want you to recognize is that just on your maps, you're going to see this number. It's going to tell you the declination. When you start practicing with your compass on a physical map, you're going to learn how to utilize that declination to shift and account for changes in the magnetic pole of north. So if you're wondering what that is, that's what it is, but we're not going to go into too much detail on that tonight, but worth practicing once you get deeper into declination. And that's kind of what I was talking about here. Compasses and altimeters. The key takeaway point here is that they could be intimidating, but don't let them intimidate you. They're not super expensive if you start at the foundations, and many of them are built into the things that we already have. A physical compass, you can get one for about $40. If you're going to nerd out and have one like me, that one has a few more features on it. But we also have mobile devices with compasses on them. So it's always great to make sure when we're going into the field that we have some format of those. I would recommend getting one of these. You're all here. You all want to learn about this. You're all nerding out with us right now. If you're nerding out here, you should probably have one of these to be practicing. Altimeters.
Alex, I think it's also important when we're talking about the mobile devices, you
Mm-hmm.
will actually find sometimes that it's worthwhile making a figure 8, either with your phone or with your watch in the air while you have the compass on, to get it to if it looks like it's always pointing in the wrong direction or flipping around, doing a nice big figure 8 like 5-6 times in the air will actually help you recalibrate it.
Nice. That is a great point. And also, there is a difference between, on the phone, you can set it to have true north or magnetic north. But true north is only available when the GPS is working. Again, these are more details I could go into if I had lots more time, but the key things here are understanding, again, right tool, right time. So understanding the limitations to these different tools and when they're appropriate to use. Another example here being that GPSs can have different inputs. So you can either have a GPS altimeter, which is using your GPS position to assume altitude, or a barometric based one, which is using pressure to figure out your altitude. So there are certain watches that have one or the other or both, and different systems that have one or the other or both. So learning which ones those are, and having one that's barometric based and pressure based is the best thing to make sure that the GPS isn't interfering with our measurements there. How long can I know we're supposed to go with 40 minutes and I'm already at 43.
You are welcome to,
how much
if you're
further I can
welcome to
go.
stay, we're welcome to have you. There
Okay.
are questions that we'll go to that, but please don't feel yourself rushed. This is really good information.
Okay, good. Because I feel like I'm going to go into bearings and resection, which I think are probably two of the most important things here. So I'm going to go through those. Thanks for all the thumbs up, guys. And bring you to one more point, and then hopefully these will be indicators for people to be like, oh yeah, I got to go and practice this more. So we'll get into those. Okay, so we've got our compass, we've got our altimeter. These are our key tools to be able to find ourselves in the field with our maps, right? So I could teach you how to shoot a bearing right now, but I'm not gonna, because it's way better to do it in the field. I remember when I was learning this for my hiking guiding, reading this, and I am a kinesthetic learner. And reading this, I was like, yeah, I kind of get it, but I got to be out there. Like, I can't just, shoot a bearing at the window of my neighbor. Like, it's just not going to do anything, right? Can't do that on the map either. So all I'm saying here is take it with a grain of salt, but introducing you to bearings is understanding the direction between myself or us and the landmark on the map. And we use our bearing to understand what that angle is, so we can start to infer information from that. So when we're shooting bearings, we're generally looking for landmarks that we can identify with our maps, or that we know previously, that are not too far away from us. If I was at the top of, I don't know, like Seymour, and I shot a bearing and I could see Rainier ain't gonna do anything for me because it's so far away that any slight deviation in my shooting my bearing towards Rainier is really could potentially throw off my measurement. So being able to identify, in this example, I really like this, a bit of math, a 5-degree error in your bearing is, 85 meters off of 1 kilometer or 425 meters off of 5 kilometers. So you can see that with that increasing distance, that the margin of error goes up quite a bit. So that's why being able to shoot a bearing to something closer to us is more ideal. So with your compass, you'd be shooting that bearing. I will send you all to YouTube University, and or even better, go take a navigation course with a local guiding company, because they're great and they're not better than your ASTs, but as essential as your AST courses. So that is where you will learn to shoot a bearing with someone who knows exactly what they're doing and is not showing it to you on Zoom. So that is one take-home message for today. But that is what a bearing is, and that is what we're aiming to do. The reason that we want to learn to shoot bearings is that if we get stuck and we don't know where we are on the map, we can start to use our understanding of terrain features, our understanding of landmarks, and our skills with a compass to find ourselves on the map. This is what all of this is pulling together, right? So let's say that we're in this spot and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't know where I am or which direction I need to go, because I'm trying to figure out how to get down, I don't know, not down there, that's too steep, and safely down from here, right? I'm going to look at and try to see if there's distinguishable features that I can shoot bearings to resect and find my point on the map. So a lot of people are like, isn't this triangulation? I'm pretty sure triangulation is kind of an out of fashion term, but triangulation theoretically is finding the location of an unknown landmark by measuring from known locations. So think about like triangulating with satellites, right? They're using their known location to find you. But resection is for you to find yourself based on other known locations. So what we're doing here is we're looking for landmarks. So let's say this is me. I don't know where I am. Oh, I see this peak. I know that peak. I recognize it. I'm going to shoot my bearing in that direction. Okay, this is the measurement I have. I'm going to draw a line on my map in that direction that I got off my bearing. I don't know where it's going to go. I could be anywhere along this line theoretically, but I also kind of know these terrain features around me. So I might be in this broader area. Then there's this lake that I recognize. Okay, shoot the bearing there, pull that back. Okay, there's kind of a close crossover point. Well, I found another peak there that I recognize. Let's shoot a bearing there. And now we can start to see where those points are interacting. And then on top of that, what we can do, which is even, or just as powerful, I'm not going to say more powerful, is having that altimeter to know what our altitude is, so we can follow the contour line that is equivalent to the altitude and be another point that we can put to really figure out where we are and where those are intersecting. And that is the best way you can find yourself in the field utilizing those tools. And really fun to practice. If you're ever out, I highly recommend just going out. This is why it's fun. Take the paper maps and use that to try to do a resection yourself with you and your friends. See it, compare, contrast, see what you get. And yeah, it's such a powerful skill set to have. And again, something you will learn in a navigation course.
The altitude, by the way, so key. If you happen to have a
So
map
key.
that has the trail on it, you can sometimes just find out exactly where you are because it's the only place that has that altitude.
Mm-hmm. A longer story I had, I'm going to make one sentence now. When we were preparing for our exams, I love doing stuff in the Alpine because I can see everything. I hate doing it in the forest because you can't see anything. And then I get stressed out. Not actually stressed out, but a bit more nervous. But I was in this area with so much blowdown and you could not see a thing going out of there. And I somehow took a slightly off trail, and this is all off trail, like to give myself a little bit more credibility here. This is all off trail travel, but I had a route in mind. And I go in that way and we just get stuck, like in the worst blowdown of my life. And I'm so frustrated. And this is going to go into this last slide. So flustered, so angry internally, and trying to think, how do I get myself out of this situation? Use my compass. I was like, okay, I know the ridge we're looking for is in this general direction. And I know this is my altitude. And I know based on my map, I'm probably on this ridge. And if we just stay on this and just go through all this garbage, I'm going to find that ridge. And we found it. But I was really mad that I was stuck there. But knowing my altitude and being able to realize where I was somewhere along that line was the game changer. Otherwise, I would have maybe gotten way more frustrated and angry.
For sure.
And that leads into my final point, which is, what do we do if we get lost? We use the stop protocol. So stop moving. Don't be like me going through all this slowdown trying to figure out my way through. Just stop, think, take a breath, clear your head, get less mad, observe, look around, use your tools, use your altimeter, use your compass, try to figure out how you can use those. If you can see things, not like where I was, but if you can see outside of you, try a resection. Utilize those tools and the skills that you have to try to pull in the data around you and place yourself in the terrain. And then you can make your plan. So if you're still stuck and you don't know where to go, your tools aren't working, it's a great time to call for help and stay put and don't move. Just stay where you are. Don't try. If you do not have the tools to figure out where you need to go or where your last known point was, the best thing you can do is avoid getting more disoriented. And we see this so much with the search and rescue calls and the reports that they put out and the summaries. It's just the best thing this person did was stayed put. They called for help and they stayed put. And we see it over and over and over again because it works. So hopefully we don't get in those situations, but that is the key answer and the big takeaway. I know that it's very helpful for so many parties and that we see through BC AdventureSmart, which is extremely helpful. Okay, take homes. Practice. Take the tools. Practice with your friends or learn from professionals. Learning navigation helps the SAR teams. Paper versus digital, bring them both when you can. Tools, play with the different map tools, especially the online tools. get yourself a compass and altimeter, even if it's an entry-level one. It can make a huge difference in your practice and maybe in a situation where you're really going to need them. Field skills. We've gone through compass, altimeter, resection very quickly. Those are just cues for you to go and learn more and to practice them yourself in the field. And remember to stop if you're stuck or disoriented. And that's it. Sorry, I'm over time.
And this, we could listen to you go on for hours because you're a great presenter, and B, you've got a lot of really good experience and you do a great job of communicating. So thank you very much. We do have questions though, which means people were paying attention, and I really appreciate you guys doing that.
Yay.
You can go into the
Yeah, that
Q&A and
works.
vote on the questions that you want. We are going to try and get as many as we can. So we're going to go super fast through some of these. We are going to start with Robert's question. He asks, does he understand that SAR prefers the decimal coordinate system? So I'll quickly answer that. It's interesting because another person asked, what does SAR use? So when you go to report, we prefer you to report using latitude and longitude with decimal degrees, for sure. Why? Because the person answering the phone would be potentially a 911 operator, depending on where you are. It could be a person from a police service, a person from fire service who may not be familiar with any other coordinate system and won't know to ask the question or what seems like it's correct. So if you use decimal degrees, you're almost always going to get that communication through to us. Internally, we use UTM, but we don't
I
want
didn't
you
know
to.
that.
We want you
Cool.
to use decimal degrees. So there you go. Moving on to the next question, Albert wants to know, can you explain how to calculate mean declination on maps that could be out of date because it's been years since?
That's a tough one because declination and the magnetic north drifts continuously. And so the declination difference per year that's written on a map, that change per year also drifts.
Hmm.
So the answer is avoid it if you have to. I think there might be online tools to calculate those, especially for older maps. Um, I have not tried using the declination shift for anything more than about 10 years old. So that's a great question, and I would have to do more research myself. But I know it becomes increasingly challenging to do so with much older maps because of that drift. So I'm not sure where you'd find the number to account for that drift.
I think the important thing is that you do this at home. You
Yeah,
should be setting
yeah.
your compass at home when you have access to the internet and you have access to modern maps and you can look at, oh, okay,
Hmm.
yeah, this is what it is in this location. Because even though the map says this, in a modern map on your computer could give you the right setting, and then you could use that based on the map on that. So you'll at least have the information that you can figure out based on what's shown and what it is right now. But don't wait until you're in the field and you're trying to use your tiny little screwdriver. Oh,
Or you don't have a screwdriver and you're trying to use your nails.
yeah, exactly. Trying to use
Oh,
your
see,
little nail.
there's a lot of great messages coming in right now about where to find the data for the declination. It's really, really helpful.
Awesome.
So you guys should be doing the seminar, not me. Teamwork,
Robert
team
asks,
seminar.
so we talked briefly between the difference between UTM and a lat long. Wanted to know what
Hmm.
MGRS is. Do you happen to know that off the top of your head? Is it easy enough to explain in a minute or two?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer for it.
There you
I
go.
apologize. Yeah,
We will
I
encourage you to seek out good old YouTube and see if they can give you a difference between UTM and MGRS.
the
Uh,
academic in me wants to reason with it, but I know it won't. It'll just be a waste of time. So I'm being super honest.
no, listen, we'd much rather point people in directions where they can do their own research.
Mm,
So Angela asks, regarding cliff lines that come together on the maps, are
mm.
outcrops also considered cliffs? So how does it look like if I have like something sort of outcrop so that I'm sort of hanging off of
Oh,
the
those
edge and
are
it goes underneath?
yeah, an outcrop cliff
Hmm.
feature. They're quite rare to find. Can you be, so is the question how am I identifying that on a map
On a
or,
map, yeah.
Sometimes it depends on the map provider. So if you look at the NTS standards, they have specific standards for how they delineate things too. So obviously it can differ between regions. But often you will see if it is like that, it can be an overlapping line, which would be an indicator for that. Sometimes there's hash marks depending on the provider. But I would say if you're on a specific map and you want to know if there's that feature, looking at their legend to see, because if there
Yeah.
is that there, they probably included it in the legend. And if not, looking at the standards of the map and their systems. Again, at home before you go out into the field.
I've also seen some maps show up with little triangles pointing in the direction of
Yeah,
the overlap. And so
yeah, yeah.
but you're right, it completely depends on the mapping program.
I was looking up
Uh,
all the different cliff mapping options for our series, and it differed across the board depending on how they identified it. So yeah, great question.
Julie asks, all trails. She's saying her all trail subscription is up and was wondering what we would
Mhm.
consider upgrading to. Now, I know there's Gaia is a great mapping software. I've
Mhm.
recommended to others. It's a great entry marking that also has some good advanced features. But I do want to point out that All Trails isn't just about the I want to share my information. It can also have very valuable information along the lines of um, uh, the trail is there's overblow, or the trail
Yep.
is now impassable, or I can't get to it with my car. So those
Mhm.
things are still valuable, and you can get them with the free version, and then use a good
Yep.
mapping software for actually planning your route. What are your thoughts on what you like by way of mapping software yourself?
So I still check all trails. I don't have the subscription to it anymore because I also download my maps from other places. So I
Hmm.
recommend still using all trails to check those conditions because we do have high volume of information there. In terms, I have used Gaia mostly over the past few years. I let my Gaia subscription go and I'm currently trying out Granite more and enjoying that. But I will admit, in my planning and everything, I'm using a combination of things. So I have been using Granite in the field. I've been using CalTopo, especially for regions that I'm less familiar with. And CalTopo, I luckily have a pro membership too as a guide, but you can get a lot of information off the free version too. In fact, you can get a lot more layers, I'm pretty sure, off the free version of CalTopo than you can with Gaia, but it is not a great digital interface.
Yeah.
It's a little bit clunky. So I've been enjoying. I would suggest. I'm pretty sure Sandra can also tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think people on this call will have access to the higher features of Granite. I believe we can talk about that in a bit, but those are the main ones that I go to.
Nifty. Um,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this to Sandra. Pam is asking a quick question. This is our last question for today. What are the options to call for help if out of cell range? I'll give you a first crack at it, and then I might throw in a couple of things at the end there.
We talk a lot about trip planning, and I know we always talk about leaving that at home with an emergency contact, and that's key, right? So if you have your primary communication device or your secondary communication device, we're asking you to understand the difference between both. Primary would be in reach Zoleo spot, satellite based, rugged. Our cell phones, our lovely little tag alongs that go everywhere with us, aren't so rugged. And then leaving that plan at home with friends or family. If for some reason there's no comms available, for whatever reason, we've left that itinerary with an emergency contact and they know what to do with that information if you're not back on time. And that's to call 911, pass on that information to the tasking agency, which an example would be RCMP, municipal police, and they reach out to the local search and rescue group and they can read that itinerary, where you are, who you're with, your skills, your abilities, and understand your location. And that's a form of communication. I know Alex talked about communication. I love that you used that in your verbiage tonight in looking at the maps and understanding some form of a language. And it
Mhm.
really is another language, but it's a language we can all speak if we understand it.
Totally.
Indeed. Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, there are new features, and people think, oh, well, I can use the satellite feature of my cell phone. That's the same cell phone you're taking pictures with. That's the same cell phone you'll run out of battery with. That's the same cell phone that you might crack the screen on. So remember that it's not necessarily going to be the one that's available when you most need it. Sandra, wow. What a great webinar. We have a couple things to give away before we finish off. What are those about?
We do as we wrap up, and thanks for hanging out with us. But it was easy to do. Alex, you had so much information. We could sit here and listen to more. I know we could. And I think we've all taken away quite a bit tonight. We have two great packages to give away. Well, a few actually, by the way. So everyone who joined tonight, and if you know anyone who registered and couldn't join us, you will all receive a Granite Pro free trial for 3 months. So it's the app that Alex was talking about. That information will come to you in a follow-up email from us. So that's great. Everyone and anyone who registered and joined us, you win no matter what, I guess, in a nutshell. So I have two questions for you. The first question you need to answer will win you one lucky winner, a 30-liter transistor backpack from Helly Hansen, a Helly Hansen tube, and a Helly Hansen running cap, not a running cat, which I saw there was some typos in the chat. But someone thought it was a running cat. I thought that was quite funny. Anyway, so those three things. Here's the question. What we want you to do is to place your email in the chat and the answer in the same field. So while I'm chatting right now, I want you to type your email, but don't press send. Don't press send. And then once you are able to answer the question that I'm about to ask you, you can then hit send. So I've given you a few minutes to queue up your emails. We will contact you via email, obviously. The question is, this ties in so nicely to what Alex talks about tonight, what we talk about all the time with our programs. And the question is, what do hard copy maps allow you to do? It was the first thing that came out of Alex's mouth when she talked about hard copy maps. There were a few things, but the first thing was really important. One of them was to read the map. Another one that I'm looking for, because I'm not seeing, I'm trying to help you here. Okay, it was a vague question. It's okay, I'll give you that. You can kick me under the table for that one. It starts, because I don't see it coming through. Oh, I take that back. Oh, it went flying up. Anyway, the answer is practice. Practice, 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 practice. So, getting familiar with your gear, getting familiar with what you're carrying, getting familiar with the essentials that you take, and all these things through training and mentorship. Practice, practice, practice is key. So we'll find the right one who came through with practice as the first answer. Thanks for massaging that with me. Here, my next question is a little bit more clearly. Sorry for any confusion on the first one. This one, we have 3 lucky winners. So the first 3 people to answer this one correctly, each one of you will win a 1-year Granite Pro membership. It's really quite exciting. This question is referring to field skills. Alex talked about coordinate systems. One was UTM, and what was the other one?
Lots of people have that one.
Look at
That's
all
good.
those. Okay, I asked that a little bit more clearly. Okay, thanks for playing my reindeer games. As we conclude tonight, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you've joined us for a few before this. If not, thanks for coming for the first time. We know we have lots of search and rescue volunteers that join us as well. We appreciate your time for coming for this as well. Our next one's July 6th, and we have a very skilled search and rescue volunteer joining us. Her name's Maria, and she's with Lions Bay Search and Rescue, and she's going to get into the nitty-gritty of trip planning. We're going to refer to a recent task that happened within the last 12 months, and she's going to really talk about the idea of that and how it's tied into your safe return. I know we get the gist of it, but she's going to jump into the weeds with us. So I really encourage you to join us July 6th. On behalf of the 3,250 search and rescue volunteers, 78 groups, and everyone who takes the time to be safe outdoors, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time, your support, and we'll see you next time. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night, folks.